Well, it's summer vacation and the art lady is at home. And I'm going to be cooking today one of our family recipes. It is called Polish Chopped Suey. I don't want my steam to steam up my camera here. It's called Polish Chopped Suey, and my grandmother cooked this, who was Polish, and she married an Albanian man. Of course, I don't think that was kosher for their families, but they did it anyways. Back then, they like to marry their own kind, Polish to Polish, Albanian to Albanian. But anyways, my grandmother married him, and he didn't provide much money for the family, so she had to do a lot of working. She worked in the mills in New Hampshire, but she came up with this recipe for her family, and she called it Polish Chopped Suey. And it's ground beef, and I'm sure she put in salt pork, but I'm not putting in the salt pork, because she threw in that salt pork into everything. But it's ground beef, and this is about a pound of ground beef. I put a little bit more because I like it a little bit more meaty. Probably about a pound and a half of ground beef, but you can do it with a pound if that's up to your taste of how much meat you want. But I did a pound and a half. You can do 1 to 2 diced onions. Now this is what I do for my ground beef is this was a roast. I think it was a London broil roast or some kind of roast. Big giant roast that was on sale at our Publix. I just buy roasts and ground them up. Cheap roasts, grind them up, have the guy grind it, and then I use that as my Hamburg. And you can see when I do the Hamburg like that, there's no grease on it, so I don't have to drain anything. So I take my, it smells delicious. So I take my Hamburg now, I'm browning it, and at the same time I'm going to throw in my onions. I like it with a lot of onions, so I did 2 small onions, but you can do, 1 onion if you want, depending. All of this is a kind of a recipe that you do to taste, but this is a pound and a half what I'm using, because I like cooking the heck out of these onions. A pound and a half of hamburger. This is 2 small onions, and then what we do is we add, after this is all cooked up real good, I'm going to put a cover on it too so that the onions get softened, but after this is all cooked up real good, we're going to throw in some cabbage, and that's what makes it this chopped suey. And the reason my grandmother, and I don't know where this recipe came from, this is just something she served her families, and back then, in the 20s and 30s, 40s, money was tight. Like I said, she worked in the mills when she was raising her kids. She had 5 kids, by the way, and the husband barely did any kid rearing and work with the kids. So she had to come up with cheap recipes, and apparently this was something that they served their family. So it's called Polish Chopped Suey. It's your ground beef, onions, and then I'm going to put some cabbage in it. 1 head of cabbage. Now see, that's what stretches, because she would grow the onions in her garden, she would grow the cabbage in her garden, so it was a way of stretching that 1 pound of meat. They made it less meaty than I did, pound and a half, with her family and all her children. And then she would use a can of Cambles, or I don't know what brand she actually used, but it was tomato soup. And so this gives it this this flavor. But this is her version of, what she called Polish Chopped Suey. Like I said, I don't know where this came from. So I'm going to show you what it looks like. I'm going to let this simmer so that all the meat is cooked, and I'm going to put it down on low now. My pan started out high, and then what I did was I turned it down to about a 4, which is kind of a medium. And now I'm simmering it so that the onions can cook. And some people like to brown their onions first. I don't bother. But depending on how you like it, do you like your onions crunchy? Do you like them, just cooked? Do you like them brown, caramelized? So it's up to you how you want to do this process of it. Like I said, I am a lazy cook, so this is me. Throw everything in the pot all at once, all at one time. Goodbye. I'm done. And then I'm going to put my cover on, and I'm going to simmer that till that hamburger's cooked on very low. And while I'm simmering that, let me make sure this is the right cover. Nope. While I'm simmering that on low, I am going to, oops, I had to get it out of my cover drawer. No, it's still not the right cover. While I'm simmering it, I think this is the bigger one. I am going to cut up, no, this is the giant. Maybe it is this giant one. Yeah, that's it. I am going to, Camille, while I'm simmering this, she's guarding her food, my dog. I am going to cut up my cabbage. So I'm letting that simmer. I'm going to cut up the cabbage, and I'm having trouble with my drawer here. I'm going to let that simmer, cut up my cabbage, and then I'm going to go ahead and put the cabbage in as soon as I have it all cut up. And I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. Here's my little monster here, though. She is sitting next to me, guarding her food from the other one there. And so sorry about the noise. Okay, I just finished shredding the cabbage, and I just did thin, like you would a coleslaw. And that's one head of cabbage. I'm going to put it in the pan, stir it around, put it back on the cover, and simmer it. I am also going to add to this the can of tomato soup. I'm going to add approximately a teaspoon of sea salt. And you can salt it to taste. Some people like more, some people like less. I'll do about a teaspoon and a half. And then pepper. I remember my grandmother, using lots of black pepper in things. I'm not going to put lots in. I'm going to put about probably half a teaspoon to a teaspoon of pepper. Right there. And then the Cambles soup. But again, everybody, all cooks season to taste. Season to your taste, more or less. Sometimes I don't even put any salt in. Depends on what my family's doing for dieting. I'm going to also add that can of tomato soup and a little bit of water. I'm going to add about a quarter can just to stir up lost my spatula. Just to stir up the can. I always add a little quarter can just to get all of the insides of that can. The scrapings. And then you want to cook it till I don't want to put this on the heat. You want to cook it till the cabbage is tender. And believe it or not, this tastes pretty good. Now you can also add, which she did not do, which I may, you'll have to see. I'm going to add, I want to get more veggies in this, a can of stewed tomatoes, but we will see how this is going to be. This. We're on a diet this summer. We're doing more veggies from the garden and farmer's market. I'm doing a market challenge where my dinners are just meat and things I get from the farmer's market. And you can see how that can of tomato soup is giving it this neat texture and sauce and flavor. And actually this tastes amazing. This is one of the things I remember liking as a kid. My mom cooked it, of course, because she cooked all my grandma's stuff. Now, that's the grandma I'm talking about on my dad's side, who's Polish and Albanian. Actually, she married the Albanian. But My mom cooked all my dad's foods when he was a kid, growing up. So we had them too. The favorites that my dad liked. And this was one of her family favorites. Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead, let that simmer until that's, and I'm gonna turn this down to probably a 2 on my stove. And let that simmer, 2 to a 3, so that the cabbage is tender. And that is what we do. That's what's called Polish Chopped Suey. And I'll show you in the end what it looks like when it's all simmered and done. And there's our finished Polish Chopped Suey. And it just takes a few minutes to cook. Very easy, very simple. Of course it was, if it was big and elaborate, I wouldn't even do it. And inexpensive. So this is a great way to stretch a head of cabbage, or a pound of actually, to stretch the hamburger. So what do you think, Colin? Have you tried it? It's a great,
yeah,
good. So 13-year-old says, yeah, good. So he's eating it. And like I said, you can flavor it the way you want. I'm sure my 13-year-old's going to throw some hot sauce on this thing, because he throws hot sauce on everything. But flavor it up the way you like. But I like it just the way she cooked it. And salt and pepper, and good to go. You can throw in garlic if you'd like, however you'd like it. But the tomato, what's interesting is this tomato, it doesn't taste like tomato soup. It just tastes like a light sauce. It's slightly sweet with a little, a little bit of ground beef. And I do want to mention, though, that if you do use ground hamburger, remember I used a roast. I ground up, had the butcher grind it up. But if you use a hamburger, you need to drain all the fat. If you look here, I didn't drain anything. It's just the juice of the hamburger, or the ground roast. And then the tomato, a little bit of tomato sauce. Here, this is what's in the pan here for the juice. If you do use that ground beef, though, you need to drain the fat, because otherwise this is going to be too greasy. My grandmother used a little bit of that salt pork, so if you want to put a little bit of a cube of salt pork, I'd say by 2-inch by 2-inch cube as you're cooking up the onions. It'll flavor this differently too. But I don't use salt pork just for the extra added fat. I try and make this a little bit low-cal. That's why I use my own ground roast. Very low calorie, and then it's actually healthy for you. So I hope you enjoy my grandmother's recipe for Polish Chopped Suey. And if you like it, let me know in the comments, because I love to share my traditional family recipes with everybody.